It is the Resistance Report for March 24th, 2017. Good evening. Today marked a turning point in the Donald Trump administration. He lost big. Donald Trump hitched his star, his wagon, his political future to Paul Ryan and conservative Republicans in the House. Not as conservative as many of them wanted, however, but nevertheless, it was a traditional Republican goal to replace and mostly repeal the Affordable Care Act. They couldn't do it. Now, it wasn't a surprise they couldn't do it because they couldn't do it for 7 years. Republicans have been in control in the House for a very long time, and they have tried for 7 long years to come up with a bill to repeal, and many of them wanted to replace the Affordable Care Act. They couldn't do it. Now, Donald Trump comes in, he's new president, and he says, well, I will do it. He promised it during the campaign. It was one of his major campaign promises. He was going to repeal Obamacare, he said, the Affordable Care Act, and replace it with something really beautiful. You remember that? It wasn't that long ago. Well, today, Paul Ryan delivered to Donald Trump the bad news. The person who wrote The Art of the Deal, who was supposed to be the person who had the ability to strike deals, to make deals, to get almost anything done he wanted. Well, guess what? Donald Trump failed today. Donald Trump, in other words, is a loser. Donald Trump doesn't want to be thought of as a failure or a loser, but he did fail. He did lose big today. The Emperor's New Clothes. Remember that story, that childhood story? It turns out that Donald Trump has no clothes, and a lot of people discovered it today. Now, many of us knew that all along, that his braggadocio, his image that he tried so carefully to cultivate of being a strong man was all a sham, but it became very, very clear today how much of a sham it actually is. You remember, he said not only is he the person who can do the art of the deal, he also was somebody who was going to clean up Washington. Remember that? His White House is in shambles. He was going to whip Washington into shape. Well, Washington is whipping him. He was going to drain the swamp. Well, he's making the swamp deeper, bringing in more alligators and crocodiles and snakes. Donald Trump is failing big time, bigly. He's failing at being president of the United States. His lame attempt today to save face was so transparent, almost to be laughable, but this is not really anything to laugh at. He said that the Affordable Care Act, that he still calls Obamacare, even though Barack Obama is no longer in Washington, no longer around, he'd still like to blame Barack Obama, but he says the Affordable Care Act will explode on its own, and then Democrats will come running to Trump. He says today was actually a big failure for Nancy Pelosi. Hello? Donald Trump wants you to believe, wants the public to believe that the Affordable Care Act will explode. It's not going to explode. The Congressional Budget Office last week concluded in its report that there is no death spiral for the Affordable Care Act. Yes, premiums are going up. They're going up because healthcare costs are going up all over the country. And more importantly, the people who are the beneficiaries of the Affordable Care Act, they get subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, so they are not hurt when premiums go up. That is the whole purpose of having subsidies that rise when premiums rise. Donald Trump, it's not a death spiral. Donald Trump, it's not going to explode. Yes, healthcare has got to be reformed in the United States. We need a single-payer system, Medicare for all. Until we get that, we're going to have rising costs, and there are going to be a lot of problems. Donald Trump says it's now on the Democrats' heads. The Democrats own this. Well, I have news for our president. The Democrats are in the minority. The Republicans run the government. Republicans have the executive branch. They also have the House. They have the Senate. Guess what? Whatever happens to the Affordable Care Act, the Republicans own it now. They tried. They had a chance to replace it. They had a chance to repeal it. They had a chance to reform it. They blew it. So now it's theirs. If there are problems with our healthcare system, it is up to Republicans, at least for the next 2 years, to fix it. Who do they expect to fix it? They expect the Democrats to fix it? Democrats are in the minority. Hello? Donald Trump is blaming the Democrats when the Republicans have a majority in both houses and also the White House. He's blaming the Democrats. This is not just far-fetched. This is weird. Now, it was not a great week for Donald Trump in terms of the emperor's new clothes. He was exposed also as being a liar. James Comey said this week before the House Intelligence Committee that the FBI has absolutely no evidence to support Donald Trump's allegation that Barack Obama wiretapped him or otherwise surveyed him in the White House. No evidence at all. In other words, Donald Trump lied. That was a big lie. Oh, one other thing. James Comey also told the House Intelligence Committee that since July, there's been an investigation of Donald Trump's, and presumably Donald Trump, their collusion with Russian operatives to win the election of 2016 for Trump. And the only reason that they had that investigation, the FBI just doesn't investigate anything. Comey also said, and this is very important, he also said they had credible evidence, enough credible evidence of such collusion to lead them to the conclusion that they should investigate. Credible evidence. Hello? Donald Trump, you've been shown this week to be incompetent as a politician and as a deal maker in Washington. You've been shown to be a liar this week. You've also been shown to be possibly a traitor. We'll know more. One other takeaway from what has happened this week is Republicans cannot govern. Republicans in the House and Senate, they don't know how to govern. They have not governed this country. They can't get together and decide what to do in an affirmative way. All they have been doing for years is they've been in the opposition. They know how to say no. They're a protest party. Donald Trump came to the presidency as a protest candidate and now is a protest president. Well, you have an opposition protest party now in control of both houses of Congress, and you have a opposition protest candidate who's now president. Where is the actual governing coalition? All you have are people who know how to say no, know how to protest, know how to be in opposition. There is no governing capacity in the Republican Party. That has become very evident this week. Now, for some of you, and for part of me, certainly, I want to celebrate the worst week Donald Trump has ever had, possibly the worst week any president has ever had. But another part of me, and I'm sure another aspect of your thinking, is this is a disaster. It's a disaster for the country. A disaster in terms of not having a government, not having anybody in charge, not having any adults there in charge. This is a problem. This is why we've got to change the entire governing system we have now. Get the Republicans out of there. Get Trump out of there. Here is where your activism has been such a huge boon. Not a single Democrat was willing to sign on to the repeal and so-called replacement of the Affordable Care Act. Not a single Democrat. Now, many of these Democrats are in fairly conservative districts, but not a single Democrat in the House wavered. I have never seen such discipline in the Democratic Party, and you know why? Because of you. Because you have been pushing those Democrats, even potentially wavering Democrats, in purple districts. You have been making your voices very, very clear about the Affordable Care Act and a lot of other things. It's your actions that have actually won the day today. It's your actions that will continue to win in the future. Now, I know how tiring it is. I know that there is a kind of outrage exhaustion that many of you may feel. The Women's March after Trump's inauguration was exciting, a lot of adrenaline. Other actions have been very exciting, but now we are in the hard slog. We're in the hard work time. But you are needed as much as before. You're needed to demonstrate. You're needed to call your members of Congress. You're needed to get involved already now in the midterm elections of 2018. Many of you are already diving in, not just at the federal level, but also at the state and local levels. Now, I've mentioned to you several times indivisibleguide.com. I'm going to mention it again, and I'm going to add 2 other sources to your source book, because I want you to be able to get the information you need. The purpose of these resistance reports is to empower you. This is all about empowering you. Arguments, perspectives, context, and also empowering you with the facts you need. Now, we've got one source I keep on plugging, which is indivisibleguide.com. There's a second one I want to give you, and that is swingleft.org. Now, the advantage of swingleft.org is they will put you in touch with the closest Republican or purple district to where you live. And there are some nearby you, believe it or not. I went there this afternoon and found that there are a few California districts nearby, not that far away from me, that are Republican districts. And so I am going to do my part. I was already going to do my part, but I'll do even more in terms of trying to get these districts to swing to the left. Not because, and let me urge you to see that it's not solely because we are Democrats and they are Republicans. No. If there are good Republicans who care about this country, who will resist Trump, who will care about the poor and working people and improve the plight of the bottom 60-70% of Americans who have been getting nowhere for too long, well, I'm behind them too, and you should be too. Swingleft.org is one resource. A third resource I'm going to give you is sisterdistrict.com. It's called sisterdistrict.com. sisterdistrict.com. And what sisterdistrict.com will do is it will give you a kind of sister district, literally, in a red or purple state that you can help support, you can work with, you can lend your resources, and you can give them moral support. You can get on the telephone in terms of getting out the vote. You can do a lot of things, even though that district may be far away. So again, 3 tools today. Number 1, indivisibleguide.com. Number 2, swingleft.org. Number 3, sisterdistrict.com. And I will bring you as many other sources as I find that are reputable and that are helpful. And now your questions. Timothy Reinecke, what's the effect of all this? I assume, Timothy, you're talking about what happened today with the defeat of the Republican plan to repeal and so-called replace the Affordable Care Act. What's the effect of all this on Paul Ryan? Interesting question. Paul Ryan is going to remain Speaker, but he has been weakened. If a Speaker of the House cannot deliver, that means the Speaker of the House is not likely to be able to deliver on other things as well. And if he can't pull together Republicans in the House, that means that his credibility is seriously harmed. So there are people I know who would love to see him go. They are Republicans in the House, and he is on very thin ice right now. Next question. Jane Phillips, does this make impeachment likelier? Jane, it doesn't make impeachment directly more likely. You mean you're talking about Donald Trump, obviously, because Donald Trump is because he has shown this week that he is incompetent and also has been proven a liar and also is likely, but we don't know enough about potential collusion, but is certainly likely to be part of the FBI investigation. Well, it certainly weakens Donald Trump. Let's put it that way. It doesn't mean that an impeachment is necessarily going to happen, but it weakens Donald Trump's standing. Remember, I've said this in the past, I'm going to say it again. There are a lot of Republicans in the House who would rather have Michael Pence be president than Donald Trump. That's true of the Republicans in the Senate as well. The reason they'd rather have Michael Pence, who's now vice president, as president, is because he is a conservative and they know they can deal with him. They have dealt with him for years. Donald Trump is out of control. He's unhinged. He's unpredictable. He can't deliver. There's no reason to use him as cover anymore because he is actually a liability now. There's no advantage to them in having Donald Trump there. So the moment there is reason to move on an impeachment, and I'm suggesting, for example, the moment there is a revelation about a major conflict of interest where Donald Trump has done one thing because it's pretty clear he made money deciding things that way rather than deciding them on the basis of the public interest. Or it's becoming clearer and clearer that he did collude with the Russians to swing the election his way. Or because Donald Trump has violated other aspects of the Constitution. The First Amendment's guarantee against an establishment of a religion. The First Amendment's protection of the freedom and independence of the press. You name it. There are all kinds of grounds out there for impeachment. It becomes more likely because Donald Trump has been severely wounded in the eyes of Washington politicians who now know how weak he actually is. Next question. James Acosta. What does Trump's failure to get the Republicans to pass replacement for the Affordable Care Act mean for his ability in the future to get a big tax cut, big corporate tax cut and infrastructure? James, it means it is less likely. Donald Trump, and it's not just Donald Trump. Let me just say something about presidents, and I've worked with a lot of presidents. Presidential power has to do with appearance of having power. Let me just say that again, because it's very critical. Presidential power comes out of the appearance of having power. The more you appear to have power, the more power you actually have. And the opposite of that is that the less you appear to have power, the less power you actually have. Donald Trump was revealed today to actually not have very much power, not have very much ability to get things done, and that is a self-fulfilling prophecy in Washington. It means it's going to be harder for him to negotiate a corporate tax cut. There are a lot of factions, a lot of people in Washington, in the House and Senate, want a lot of different things. Donald Trump proves today he can't get them together. And unfortunately, that's also true of an infrastructure plan, although the advantage there is he's got a lot of Democrats who want a big infrastructure plan as well. He might get that done. Manu Deval, how long is it going to take for the Republicans who were happy to ride Trump's populist wave to start turning on him? Manu, I think it is already about to happen. And by the way, these Republicans, most of the Republicans in the House and in the Senate, they are not populists. They didn't get there riding a populist wave. They were happy that Donald Trump rode a so-called populist wave, which turns out to be a sham. I mean, he brought in billionaires and Wall Streeters and people with all sorts of conflicts of interest, people who don't actually care at all about working class people in the United States. So it was sham populism. The Republicans didn't care. They have a conservative agenda. Their patrons are patrons that come from Wall Street or from corporate America. They are very wealthy, or they're the Koch brothers and very wealthy billionaire ideologues. Those are the people who are actually behind the scenes in the Republican Party. They were happy to take advantage of Donald Trump as long as Donald Trump looked like he was a winner. Now that he's showing himself to be a loser, they don't want to have anything to do with him, is my prediction. Mark Tanney. Any thoughts about what would happen if Obama were to sue Trump for slander? Mark, it ain't going to happen. If you're a public figure, you are not going to be able to sue for slander. Susan Kenney, has Nunes, and we're talking about the head of the Intelligence Committee in the House, committed treason for sharing information about the probe without permission of the Congressional Committee? Susan, I don't know whether he has committed treason. He has apologized to his committee. He needs that committee, needs Democrats on the committee to support him, and it is a very tricky position he is now in, because the more he looks like a partisan surrogate for Trump, and remember, he was part of the Trump transition team. He is a Trumpster. The more he looks like he is speaking for Trump, the more pressure there's going to be on all Republicans in the House to set up a select committee, a bipartisan select committee to do this investigation instead of having it under the Republicans. And that bipartisan select committee is also going to be under pressure, in turn, to select an independent special prosecutor. So the more Nunes acts out the way he's been, the more likely it's going to be that we do get a bipartisan select committee. John McCain has been calling for this. Others are going to be calling for it as well in the Republican Party. Nunes is shooting himself in the foot. Paula Freston, how significant is it that Nunes is closing off public hearings? He's closing off public hearings next week. It looks bad. Now, the Intelligence Committee very often closes off public hearings because, after all, it is an Intelligence Committee and they are getting a lot of classified material. But they've already got most of the classified material they want. The only possible reason for closing off the hearing next week is they don't want the Democrats to do what they did earlier this week and basically reveal not classified information, but circumstantial evidence about Republican, particularly Trump and Trump aides' connections to Russian operatives. We have time for just one more question, and this comes from Vicky Halbecken. What do you think the Republicans will do to make sure the Affordable Care Act fails? Vicky, I don't think they are going to try to make sure the Affordable Care Act fails. And I want to go back to this. The Republicans would like to think, maybe today they're buying the line, that Democrats own the Affordable Care Act. Most Americans don't care who passed it. The fact of the matter is, Republicans run the government. If the Affordable Care Act is not working, it's the Republicans' fault. Most Americans are looking to the Republicans to govern this country. They own the presidency. They own the House. They own the Senate. If they can't run the country, if they can't fix what needs fixing in the Affordable Care Act, if, in fact, things do need fixing, then Republicans are going to be held responsible. They can't pass the buck to the Democrats. They can't pass the buck to Obama. Obama is no longer president. Obama is not even in Washington any longer. Do you see the position they're in? They can't have it both ways. They can't blame the Democrats and also have the power they have. They own the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump is a catastrophe for this country. He is showing it more every single day. He's also a catastrophe for the Republican Party. He showed that today. And he's a catastrophe for many, if not all, of the people who voted for him. And that is becoming more and more obvious. What you need to do, along with me and all of your friends and associates, is to keep the pressure on. Thank you. That ends tonight's Resistance Report. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week.